Hi, I am here with a story for you guys today. My eyeball is itching. Allergies or something. I got 2 allergy medicines, but gosh, they're itching like crazy tonight. I haven't read you guys a story in a few days from my Dreams and Miracles book by Anne Spangler. These are all true stories again, by the way. So I thought I'd read you guys one tonight. Tonight's story is called A Dream About Dad, and it's by Connie Neal. And as always, I'll start off by reading you guys the introduction. Let me turn the computer around here a little bit. Connie is an inspirational speaker with several books on her credit. A former businesswoman and youth minister, she lives with her husband Patrick and their 3 children in California, the youngest of 7 children, 5 of them half-siblings. While growing up, she was shuttled back and forth each week between 2 sets of parents, her mom and her husband, and her dad and his wife, Edith. The story of her remarkable childhood is told in her book, Dancing in the Arms of God. Her father died when she was 26. Just 3 weeks after she had given birth to her first child, the circumstances of his death disturbed her deeply, but she found surprising peace through a dream she had several days after his funeral. Now we will get into Connie's story. My father was a tornado of a man. Eccentric and driven, he was brilliant in his own way. He was a compulsive gambler with an explosive temper and more creative ideas than were good for him or anyone in this orbit. At one time, he had more than 20 different business cards with his names on them, remnants of small enterprises he had started and then abandoned. He generated enough quick bursts of energy to short-circuit a mainframe computer. We lived in a 3-bedroom house in a nice little neighborhood right across from my junior high school. Ours was the corner lot with a large with a large lawn in front of a backyard. Dad would start projects in the garage, which would spill onto the patio, which would ooze into the backyard, which would creep to the top of the 6-foot fence. When the yard was completely crammed, with only 2-foot path to walk on, he built 10-foot extensions on the walls. Some of his projects did rather well until the gambling took its toll. It was frustrating to watch his repeat performances. Over the years, his losses mounted. Dad was going to make something of himself if it killed him. By the time he was in his early 60s, he had cashed in his life insurance policies, sold everything he could get his hands on, and taken out a second mortgage on the house. Eventually, he and my stepmother Edith lost their home and ended up moving in with my sister and her husband. Looking back, I realized my dad may have suffered from what would now be diagnosed as attention deficit disorder. He couldn't seem to control the compulsive thought patterns and behaviors that drove him. Despite his shortcomings, I always knew he loved my sister and me, and I was grateful he had somehow managed to provide for us, his only children. And as I grew older, I prayed God would reveal his love for him and that Dad would have the grace to slow down. A few years before he died, he became a Christian, though he rarely attended church, and I didn't see much change in his behavior. I will never forget the last great idea Dad had before he died. He was 70 years old. It was 1984, and I had just given birth to my first child, Honey. Dad said, "I need you to make some flyers for me. I'm starting a new business remodeling bathrooms." I knew better than to point out the folly of his latest money-making scheme. "Make it clear on the flyer I'm offering a 10-year guarantee," he insisted. The irony of a 70-year-old guaranteeing his workmanship for 10 years was completely lost to him. He wasn't trying to deceive anyone. He was determined to work hard and fast, and wasn't ready to take leave of the planet until he had finally achieved something. In December 1984, I spent the evening with him in my sister's home. Uncharacteristically, Dad seemed tired and went to bed early in the middle of the night. He suffered a severe heart attack. "Get my pills," he screamed to Edith and my sister. They hadn't even known of his heart problem and had no clue where the pills might be. He clutched his chest and yelled at Edith to bring him the newspaper. Flipping frantically through the paper, he pointed to an ad. It offered cremation for only $400. My dad spent the last moments of his life worrying about money for his own funeral. It was heartbreaking. The day before, I had been typing up the flyer with a 10-year guarantee. Now my father was dead. We managed to give Dad a decent burial after all, but I was terribly disturbed by his passing. He had always had such great aspirations for himself and his children. It was frustrating to watch him fail so often, because he had instilled in me the confidence that I could do whatever I set my mind to. His philosophy had worked for me, but had failed him and troubled me. I never minded that Dad wasn't able to leave me with any kind of material inheritance. I didn't need or want that from him, but I wondered if there was any other legacy I could draw from his life, any lesson I could glean. The night after the funeral, I prayed, asking for wisdom in the midst of so many disturbing feelings. That's when I had the dream. I dreamed I was back in our old house after the funeral, just like old times. I looked for Edith and asked if I could climb in bed with her, something I had done as a child whenever I felt afraid or alone. "Come on, kiddo, you can get in bed with me," she replied. "I don't want you to be alone either." We both dozed off and then heard the front door open and close. Someone was whistling and clamoring around, knocking into things in the living room. Edith and I looked at each other, but neither of us were afraid. We knew who had entered the house. The bedroom door banged open, and there stood my dad. He was beaming, standing tall, dressed in a new pair of khaki work pants and a crisp flannel shirt. Around his waist was a brand new utility belt loaded with shiny tools. "Dad, what are you doing here?" I said. A grin spread across his face as he said, "Well, I had to show you people. I had to come and tell you that I finally found a place where I am appreciated." He was laughing when he said it. "They know what I'm worth up there." "But Dad, don't you know you're dead?" "Of course I know I'm dead," he replied, still chuckling. "You see these tools? The Lord gave these to me, and I'm still up there working on the mansions right now." Well, that's all I wanted to say. I finally found a place where they know what I'm worth. Then he left without saying goodbye. He turned around, whistled, and was gone. It was just like my dad to barge in and then leave without a proper farewell. Then I woke up. I couldn't help but think that this lifelong dream had finally been realized. He had at last found acceptance and real appreciation he had cherished and never had been on earth. I know my father was a man of many problems, but I also know that God is merciful. After my dream, I couldn't stop thinking about the passage in Scripture, "For no one can lay any foundation other than the one already laid, which is Jesus Christ. If any man builds on this foundation using gold, silver, costly stones, wood, hay, or straw, his work will be shown for what it is, because the day will bring it to light. It will be revealed with fire, and the fire will test the quality of each man's work." I was actually aware of my father's failings. If it had been up to the human beings to pass judgment, most of us would have said, boy, is he going to get, boy, is he going to get as talking to when he gets there. And maybe he did get a talking to, I don't know. But the scripture is clear. In the process of entering into God's presence, the Lord lets the fire sweep away everything that isn't of him, and all that's left is good. God sees the true kernel of the man. He knows that some of the people who seem weakest might be better than we are because of what they've struggled with. Each of us has a plan to walk, a path to seek, and God is the only one who knows how well we've managed it. Did my dad really appear to me, or did I simply dream about him as a way of resolving intolerable tensions? You may wonder, I don't fully understand how such things work, but I do believe that dream was more than just a dream. I believe my dad really did appear to me in my dream. And I believe that he is up in heaven working on God's mansions and is more happier than ever. Whatever the case, I am certain it was a gracious answer to a heartfelt prayer. And that, guys, was, what was her name, Candace? That was Connie's story, A Dream About Dad. So I hope you guys enjoyed Connie's story, and God willing, I'll be back with you guys another story, maybe tomorrow. But our next story will be Fear No Evil, and it'll be by Faith Field, and it's a really short one. So I will let you guys go for tonight. I love you guys, and I hope you guys have a good rest of your night, and I love you guys. God bless. Bye, guys.